to be here. We thank you, God, for protecting us and guiding us, my God. And we know, Father, that you have a word to speak to us, Lord. And we trust, Holy Spirit, that you will teach us and that you will show us the truth of your scripture and that you would convict us wherever conviction is needed, my God. I place myself in your hands, Lord, and I ask that you use me as your instrument, that I be your mouthpiece, my God, that I will be a vessel in your hands, Lord, and that you will just be in control of this teaching tonight, Father. In the name of Jesus, amen. Oh, sorry, yeah, thanks. Hey, yeah. All right, so tonight I have been given the honor and the privilege to bring a word to you guys tonight. And it's a very, I want to say touchy, it's a very delicate subject. It's a very delicate theme and a very serious debate in today's day and age, and especially in our nation and the way things are right now. The debate, I feel like every 4 years, right before election time, it spurs up. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's debating about it. Now that election is over, though, we can't not just leave it on the back burner and not talk about it anymore. And of course, I am talking about the issue of abortion in our nation and in the world, really. So I've titled the class for today, My Body, My Choice, and that's with a question mark, because we're going to be talking about whether or not this is true when it comes to abortion, amongst other issues in our society. So we're going to start with some definitions, just so that we can... It's not on. Yeah. No, it's not going. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, wait. Is it up? Okay. So we'll start with some definitions just to be sure that we're all on the same page. So the first one is pro-life. So what is pro-life? So a lot of us as Christians, we identify ourselves with this side of the argument. We call ourselves that we are pro-life, but what does that really mean, right? What does that stand for? So the term pro-life, and really just by looking it up on Google or wherever, this is what comes up. It says the belief that all human life is created equal, regardless of size, level of development, education, and degree of dependency. Therefore, taking the life of a preborn baby is a violation of the fundamental right to life. The fundamental right to life is found in our Constitution. The next one is pro-choice. Now it's working? Thanks. So pro-choice, and again, this is the definition that comes up, is the belief that every woman should be endowed with the right to her own life and body. Therefore, denying a woman an abortion is denying her the right to bodily autonomy. So now, this is a pro-choice definition, right? Basically, they're saying a woman has a right to do as she pleases with her body, and nobody, especially the government, has any right to tell her what she can or cannot do with her body. So let's define this term bodily autonomy. This is important because you will see this come up. No, it's not working. Yeah. Bodily autonomy is a term that comes up a lot in college campuses. It's still the main argument of the pro-choice side, and it's what they always bring up. At the end of the day, it's all about the woman's rights. So bodily autonomy is the right to governance over our own bodies. Basically, I govern my body, right? Specifically for women, and then it says non-binary and trans people, because, now we gotta be all inclusive. This means making decisions about one's physical self. It also means the freedom to take up space in the world. And then it says, unfortunately, though, bodily autonomy is not always seen as a right. Of course, this is something against the pro-lifers that are saying that's not actually a right. So what is the problem with this definition, though? There's a lot of problems with it. Mainly the fact that we are not actually allowed in any other circumstance to do whatever we please with our bodies. But we'll see that later on. Next is abortion. What is abortion? An abortion is a procedure to end a pregnancy. It uses medicine or surgery to remove the embryo or fetus. It's important to know the terminology used in these definitions, because if you notice, the word baby or preborn baby is never used. It's an embryo, it's a fetus, because if we use those terms, somehow it dehumanizes the person that actually is there. It uses medicine or surgery to remove the embryo or fetus and placenta from the uterus. To terminate or end a pregnancy is to take the life of a preborn baby. That is what happens. I saw recently, a couple of years ago, when Hillary Clinton, I think she was running, she was running to be president, and she said that abortion should be legal, it should be safe, and it should be rare. The problem with that is that, well, abortion is legal, but why should it be legal? If you think that abortion is right and it's good, then why are we saying that it should be rare? Why should it be rare then if it's not a bad thing, right? And then the other part of it being safe, the reality is that abortion is never safe. Every single abortion ends with somebody's life ending, somebody's life coming to an end, somebody being murdered. That is the reality of what an abortion does. So based on these two definitions, we can see that there is two rights that are being faced against each other. So pro-life, it's saying that there's a right to life, and then pro-choice is saying I have the right to bodily autonomy. And how do we decide which right is right? Because one of them has to be wrong. Both of them cannot coexist. One of them denies the other, and vice versa. So we need to decide on which side of the argument we're going to be in. So let's break down first this bodily autonomy idea and what it entails. For that, we're going to go to Genesis 1:1 in the beginning, because that's when it's all started. This is our foundation. This is where all of the principles are established. Genesis 1:1. You probably all know it by memory, right? Genesis 1:1. Yeah, let's say it together. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Good. Have you guys ever wondered why the Bible doesn't start with showing God as, let's say, why didn't it start with God is sovereign, right? Or God is all-knowing, or God is omnipresent, just, good. We know all these things are true of God, right? God is holy. God is all-powerful. Why didn't the Bible start with mentioning these attributes, any one of them? I actually wonder, why doesn't it say God is holy, holy, holy? Like if that was the beginning of it, we would all be, well, okay, it's a holy book for sure. So, but it doesn't start that way, right? It starts with, in the beginning, God created. So it reveals God as creator. And the reason this is important is because God as creator automatically puts us as his creation. And as his creation, we are submitted, we are subject to his authority. God has all authority. He is in full control, he is in full authority, and he is the only one that can tell us what we can and what we cannot do. So, all of these other attributes of God are within that one. God is the creator of all things. So, in his authority, he decided to give boundaries to certain things, right? Including us. But let's just take a look at creation, right? He created planets, and the planets orbit around the sun in a specific order, and none of them get out of that orbit. They have boundaries. And if they didn't, we'd be dead. They go in within their orbits and they don't get out of it. Everything that God created has certain boundaries, has certain laws. And everything in creation obeys those laws. God told the oceans how far they could go, right? This is as far as you can go, and you cannot go beyond that. And on the rare occasions that we have tsunamis, it's disaster, right? So it just tells you that God is a God of order, and he's established certain things under his authority with a reason. There's a purpose in everything that he does. This authority, however, was disobeyed, and the first disobedience was, of course, the fall of man. And we can find this in Genesis 3:4. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 4, we see what the serpent said to Eve and how the serpent tempted Eve to sin against God. And the serpent said, "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So that temptation for Eve was really, wow, you're going to be just like God. Basically, nobody's going to tell you what to do, because you're going to be in the same place as God. That is exactly what Satan did. When Satan was an angel, what made him fall was the fact that he wanted to be like God. He wanted to sit on God's throne, and that was the same temptation he presented to Eve. He said, "You will be just like God." And this sounded good to her, because human beings, we don't like authority. There's a negative connotation with this word authority. Sometimes we feel that when somebody's in authority, they're just going to take advantage of us, or they're going to abuse us, or they're going to do something bad. And sometimes it does happen, right? We see this with government. We see this with all kinds of different things. Many people do take advantage of the authority that is given to them, and they use it for the wrong thing. That does not make authority in and of itself a bad thing, though. Authority was established by God. He has all of the authority, and then he's given delegated authority. Did you guys know that in the Hebrew culture, when somebody names something, it places them in authority over that thing that they named? So, for example, when God created Adam, he named Adam. He gave him a name, and God was God saying, "You are now under my authority." When God created Eve, it was Adam who named Eve. "And you shall be called woman." When Adam gave Eve a name, now she was subject to him. This is God's order. God, man, the wife submits to the man. And then Adam and Eve named all the animals. God gave them this task. So all the rest of creation was submitted to humanity. This was the order. God, husband, wife. That doesn't mean that the wife is less than the man, but in the order of authority, this is the way it is. What happened was Eve was the first one that got tempted. She disobeyed, and then her husband obeyed her. It should have been the other way around. She should have been submitted to her husband, but it didn't happen that way. He submitted to her, and that was broken. God's established order was broken since then. So now this is the reason why people these days think that they don't need to submit to God. We broke that authority pattern. We broke everything that God created. And this is why everybody wants to do as they please. I want to be like God, so I'm going to put myself in the throne of God and dictate what I can and cannot do. I'm not going to listen to God because I have a right to bodily autonomy. I have a right to decide what is good and what is bad for me. That is what we're saying. So imagine, though, for a moment, if this was true and we could actually do whatever we wanted, why would we even have laws? Why do laws exist in the world? Why do laws exist in nations? Because if we weren't allowed to do as we please, we would destroy ourselves. We are self-destructive beings. If there were no laws to say that you cannot murder, we would have killed each other a long time ago. If there were no laws to say that you cannot steal, everybody would steal from each other. We would not be in a safe environment because we would all just do whatever we wanted to do. There wouldn't be any consequences then to us breaking those laws. So this idea of it's my body, I can do whatever I want, it's not actually true. For example, if you decided that you wanted to go butt naked out in the street, not going to go very well for you, okay? Somebody's going to call the cops, or the cops going to drive by, they're going to see you, and they're going to arrest you and put you in jail. And try to tell that cop, well, this is my body, my choice, and see how well that turns out for you. So, can you actually do whatever you want with your body? No, you can't. You can't. If we lived in a world without any laws, right? What would our world look like? If there were no restrictions, if everybody said, it's my body, my choice, I can do whatever I want, there would be chaos, there would be fear. We would be fearful because we don't know what the next person's thinking to do to me. Will be destruction, there would be death. But God did create commands. He gave us laws to abide by, which, by the way, the 10 Commandments series is starting next week. Don't miss it. So if everybody, though, on the other end, if everybody obeyed God's commands, what would the world be like? If nobody ever stole, if nobody ever killed, if nobody ever lied, what would that world look like? It would be peace, there would be joy, harmony, there would be life. Huh? There would be no taxes. Yeah, it would be a perfect world. If there is one thing that I'd like you guys to walk away with, is the fact that there's nothing that God commands of us that isn't both for His glory and for our good. Everything works out for our own good. As a matter of fact, if everybody obeyed the 10 Commandments, we would not need this class. Abortion would not exist. There wouldn't be any unwanted pregnancies. Everybody would have sex within the confines of marriage. Right? There would be no STDs. There would be no AIDS. Nobody would be dying of, sexually transmitted diseases or anything like that. It just wouldn't happen. So if we obey, when we obey and we do things God's way, it works out well for us. Many times we think that's not the case. Many times we feel that we're restricted. And now, I'm not free to do as I please. And, I have to obey these things. But actually, when we obey, we are actually free. We are actually free. So all of that to say that this right to bodily autonomy is a lie. We do have a creator who is in authority over us, and he is the one who has a right to tell us what we can and what we cannot do with our bodies. That's the reality of that, and there is just no argument against that. So God can tell me what I can and cannot do with my body. So what does God actually say about abortion, Jackie? Is it really that bad? Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look at what Genesis 9:6 says. Genesis chapter 9, verse 6 says the following. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. This is the first instance in the Bible where God makes reference against murder. So the first time he spoke against murder was not when he gave the 10 Commandments. This is it. Later on, in Exodus 20:13, we see the commandment, you shall not murder. But in the first one, Genesis 9:6, we see the reason why. God didn't just deliberately say, well, you shall not murder. Murder is bad, don't do it. He didn't just say that. He gave us the reason why. And the reason in Genesis 9:6 is for God. He says for, meaning because God made man in his image. What this means is that every time that somebody murders somebody else, they're attacking God's very own image. That is a direct attempt against his image and his name, right? God created man in his image and in his likeness. And when we take deliberately somebody else's life, we are dishonoring the image of God. We are taking it lightly. We're not honoring God's very own image. So, well, what is the next thing that they're going to say? But Jackie, that's not really a person. I'm not murdering anybody, therefore I'm not attacking the image of God because it's not actually a person. So I did a little quick Google search. I thought it wasn't going to be this easy, to be honest, because in today's culture, you'll see a lot of things being twisted. But to my surprise, I took the screenshot of my Google search. I just Googled, when does life begin? And it still says, life begins at fertilization with the embryo's conception. Development of the embryo begins at stage 1, when a sperm fertilizes an oocyte, and together they form a zygote. Human development begins after the union of male and female gametes or germ cells during a process known as fertilization. So, science, right, for those people that like to say, well, science, biology is what we really need to listen to. Biology and science is telling us that human life begins at the moment of conception. This concept has not changed. The most renowned biologists and scientists in the nation and around the world agree on this very basic principle. That is when human life begins. So now I am going to show you a few videos that are just going to tell you, and it's based on an acronym, SLED. It stands for size, level of development, I forgot the E. What was E? Environment, and D is degree of dependency. So those are the 4 letters. You're going to see the videos, and this is basically going to show you the pro-choice argument, and not even going too far, just using your logic, how the argument is flawed.
All right, so there's been a lot of talk about this recently. People debating whether or not this is a person, a valuable life, a human being to be protected, or something that's more easily disposable. I've heard a lot of people say, how can something so small be a person? Well, I'm just curious. Why can't something so small be a person? Let's think about it this way. We have 3 different people here. All different sizes, all different ages. Is the smallest person less valuable than the bigger person just because she's smaller? So what makes this any different? If size has nothing to do with the value of a human being, how can we say that the life inside of a womb is of less value simply because it's smaller? Seems pretty clear that personhood is not defined by size.
Pretty simple, right? That's an easy thing to say to somebody who will bring that argument. Well, if somebody is smaller than the other, does that make them any less human? And the answer, of course, is not. So once we've determined that life does begin at conception, and we know that that is a person inside the womb, every other argument just falls apart. So we'll move on to the next one.
All right, so there's been a lot of talk about this lately. Frankly, there's a lot to be said about this little guy right here. His cute cheeks and his button nose. Anyways, I've heard this question a lot. How can something that's not even fully developed yet be a person? Imagine if your development or abilities determined your value as a person. We'll take this duo here, for example. One of them, well, he's practically Iron Man. And the other, well, she's getting there. But just because she's not as developed as he is yet, does that make her less of a person? So what makes this any different? If our abilities or our level of development don't make or break our value as human beings, how can we say that a life inside of the womb is of less value simply because it's not fully developed yet? Seems pretty clear that personhood is not defined by level of development.
Seems pretty logical, right? Actually, once a baby is born, he's still not fully developed. Like, we don't start developing really ever. Like, our development continues throughout our lives. So at what point then do you say that that becomes a person, that baby becomes a person? At what point during their development stage are they now considered a person? You can't really say, because, again, they became a person from the moment of conception. We all know that's a brand new DNA, right? It's a unique DNA, never before existed. It has everything that they're going to be, how tall they're going to be, what their skin color is going to be. Everything is already determined from that point of conception. So moving on, environment.
All right, there's been a lot of talk about this lately. I've heard a lot of people ask, is the unborn really a person if it's not in the world yet? First, let's start by saying they are in the world, just in a different location. Let's think about ourselves. Our environments are always changing, but as we know, our personhood always remains the same. So let me ask, if the value of personhood is determined by one's environment, does that mean our value changes when we move from place to place? So what makes this any different? If our environment has nothing to do with our value as human beings, how can we say that the life inside of the womb is not a person just because its environment looks different than ours? Seems pretty clear that personhood is not defined by our environment.
This is true, right? It doesn't matter where we find ourselves in the world. If the location is within the womb or outside of the womb, it really doesn't make any difference. It does not make them less of a person. And then the last one is the degree of dependency.
All right, there's been a lot of talk about this lately. People wondering whether or not this is a person, a valuable life to be protected, or something that's more easily disposable. I've heard a lot of people say, the unborn is totally dependent on its mother, so how can it be a person? Well, I just gotta ask, why can't it be a person? Let's take this little guy for example. He's old and he can do some things on his own, play with toys and run around, but there's still a lot he needs help with. You know, like general hygiene, putting on clothes, and eating. But just because he still depends on his mom for all of that stuff doesn't make him any less of a human, does it? Then what makes this any different? If our personhood is not determined by our degree of dependency, how can we say that a life inside of the womb is not a person just because they depend on their mother for survival? Seems pretty clear that personhood is not defined by degree of dependency.
So that is actually probably one of the most common arguments. Well, it's not viable, right? It cannot live on its own. What newborn baby can really live on its own? None of them. They all continue to depend on the mom. The mom is the one that breastfeeds them, and if they stop feeding them, they will die. That's just the reality, right? And we are pretty dependent on our parents all the way until we're like 18, and sometimes even after. Like, that just is there. That relationship and that dependency of our parents is really well throughout all of our younger years of life. So to say that because it's not viable on its own and then it's not a person, it's just not true. It doesn't apply. And the flaw with a lot of these arguments is that when you apply them then to a born person already, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't make a difference. Adults are sometimes dependent on a machine to live. Right? Sometimes they're dependent on a ventilator or a what do you call those things for the heart? a pacemaker. Like there's different things that human beings or adults are dependent on in order to live. Does that make them any less human? Does that make their lives any less valuable? No, of course not. So now we're gonna move on into some recent news and things, because we need to be aware of what's going on around us and in the world. So I'm gonna show you guys on December 30th of last year, abortion in the country of Argentina was actually legalized up to the 14th week of pregnancy. What I want you guys to see is how people reacted to this news in that country, right? Because this is what we live, the world that we live in. This is the way that society thinks, and so it's important for us to know where people's minds are at, so that we are able to speak to them and correct their mentality and their way of thinking. So I'm going to show you this video just so you can get an idea of what happened in Argentina just this past December.
Resulta aprobado con 38 votos afirmativos y 29 negativos y una abstención. Resulta aprobado, se convierte en ley y se gira al Poder Ejecutivo. Seguimos con...
They're so... So they've been fighting for this for more than 30 years.
Finalmente el Estado argentino empiece a cumplir los derechos humanos de las mujeres para que tengamos aborto legal, seguro y gratuito en el hospital, y para que las mujeres podamos cumplir nuestros proyectos de vida, cumplir nuestros deseos y ser felices.
So that we can fulfill our projects and be happy. I have met women who have had abortions, and I don't want this to come across as though we're condemning anybody. There's definitely no sin too great for God to forgive. If somebody has had an abortion and you repent of that, God will forgive you. Jesus' blood is enough to wash the sin away. But this is not godly. This is satanic. I mean, you are actually so happy that you are able now legally to kill a preborn baby at 14 weeks. And thinking that because it's only 14 weeks that it's not a person, it's not the big deal, it's just a clump of cells. Like, we are all a clump of cells. You know, we're literally made up of a bunch of cells that come together. That's what we are. It doesn't change the fact that that's a human being, right? And just so that you can have an idea, I'm going to show you now a clip of what a baby actually looks like at 14 weeks.
Week pregnancy. Welcome, expectant mothers. At 14 weeks, your baby is as big as a big lemon. The biggest fetal development during the 14th week is the ability of the fetus to exhibit facial expressions. Baby's height is 3.5 inches and it weighs 1.5 ounces. Your baby's posture is improving. His neck is becoming more distinct and head more upright. Baby's arms and legs are growing to the length that is proportional to the rest of the body. As your baby's brain cells are growing and working, he or she can use his or her facial muscles in making expressions. The baby can frown, squint, and react to external stimulus. If you peek inside the womb, you might see the baby sucking his thumb. At this period, a downy, ultrafine hair called lanugo begins to develop that covers the fetus to keep him cozy and warm. Once your baby accumulates insulating fat, most of the lanugo will shed. Your baby's brain develops into two distinct halves, the left and right hemisphere. Furthermore, the liver is starting to excrete bile. while the spleen commences in the production of red blood cells. Overall, the baby is flexible and active at 14 weeks, but mothers may not yet feel his punches and kicks. Stay tuned for next week's video only on ConsumerHealthDigest.com. Till then,
So I
take
guess they
care of
probably
yourself.
feel that if they can't feel it, then it's not really there or it's not alive. But clearly it is. This is science. This is not anybody making this up. Some decades ago when Roe v. Wade was approved, they didn't have these sonogram machines that we have nowadays. But a person being able to look at images like that and denying the value of a human life is illogical. It just doesn't make any sense. It's complete rebellion against God. It's complete rebellion against everything, the order that God established in the commandments that He gave us. That's really what it is. And it's sad that people still feel this way, but we have a long way to go. I mean, we have a White House right now that is completely for abortion, and unfortunately everything that the prior administration did to protect the life of the unborn is being undone. I read today he signed an executive order undoing something that Trump had done. So now our taxes will again be paying for abortions even overseas, like as if the abortions in our own nation are not enough. Now we're paying for the ones being done in like Mexico and some other countries. That is where we're at. The question is, what are we going to do about it? You know, because we can talk about it until we're blue in the face, but when is change going to come? What can we do about this? Now, this was Argentina, and we probably, are horrified. Oh my gosh, how could they do that to a 14th week baby? In our nation, there's much worse laws. Okay, in many states, abortion is legal all the way to the point of birth, all the way through the 9th month. Here in New Jersey, a law has been brought up to the Senate of the state, and they're trying to pass a law that where already minors don't need their parents' approval or consent to have an abortion. That's already, New Jersey has some of the most liberal abortion laws. The only major restriction was that it had to be done by a physician, and that's what they're trying to get away with. So now it doesn't even have to be a physician. It could be a nurse practitioner or anybody in the medical field that feels that they can do this procedure, they can. That's what they're trying to do. And also all the way to birth. So they're going to approve this partial birth abortion, which is a procedure that has to be done when the fetus is already too big. For the other types of abortion procedures where they insert the vacuum and suck them out when a baby is already on like the 30th week or so, it's just too big for that. So they have to now do a partial birth abortion. And I'll show you guys a video. It's not too graphic. It's not bloody or anything, but it will show you what this procedure actually consists of. And you'll see, I'll explain after the video why they have to do it in this way. You can go ahead. Oh yeah, show this one first. This one is the law that's actually trying to be passed, yeah. So this is some people that are protesting against this law that's trying to be passed in the state of New Jersey, and they're talking about it.
Weinberg and Huddle are the authors of this bill that initiate this 47 pages of murder that they call the Reproductive Freedom Act. What makes this bill bad on 1,000 levels is this one particularly. This aids and abets human trafficking. Why? Because you're going to pay for every abortion, regardless of age, regardless of why these girls are pregnant. They come into an abortion clinic. The state of New Jersey will now pay for their abortions.
This bill is one of the most egregious bills that has ever been introduced. We're going to be working very hard to defeat this bill. The bill will allow non-physicians to perform abortions. I don't know how that helps women, saves women, and helps their lives or their health in any way. It's so extreme that it allows abortions. The months of pregnancy for any reason. It also allows infanticide.
This is part of the Great Commission, when people of faith who stand for righteousness go into the public square and cry out against injustice. I believe that it's important for the church to be held accountable for the laws of this land. We are salt and we are light. We are given the responsibility to impact society with righteousness and truth. The Reproduction Freedom Act, the Freedom Reproduction Act, whatever it is infanticide. It kills infants, not only in the womb when it's such as during the stages of 9 months. This bill says if the child survives 9 months, survives the abortion, you still have the right to kill the child with impunity. This is outrageous. Innocent blood, the shedding of innocent blood pollutes the land.
So yeah, even if the child survives the abortion, they still have the right to end their life. Doctors do take an oath, right? Yep. They take an oath to protect life. And any doctor that does this is just breaking that oath. Our taxes are going to be paying for it, and there's nothing really we can do. We know. I wish we had like a way to say when we report our taxes, this is where I want my money to go, where we could decide, but we can't. They take this money and then they fund these procedures. So when she was talking about, or the guy said, for sex traffickers, I read something that resounded with me and is very true. It said, abortion is a sex trafficker's best friend. Why? Because now they don't have to face any consequences. They don't have to deal with the responsibility of a pregnancy. They can just take the girl to an abortion clinic and the problem will be solved. And this is true. This is true. Pro-choice or abortion isn't really about a woman's rights. It's against the preborn baby. It's against our human rights. It's against women, really, because the majority of abortions that are done in our country are really because the woman feels or knows that she's not going to have the support of her significant other when she finds out she's pregnant. In the majority of cases, it is the boyfriend that's telling them to go and have an abortion. I'm too young. I can't deal with this problem right now. They call it a problem when it really should be a blessing. And women, they feel vulnerable. They feel scared. They don't want to do this alone. And so they feel that this is their only way out. And in many occasions, as the body of Christ globally, we are guilty of not lending them a hand. We are guilty of pointing a finger when a girl comes out pregnant out of wedlock and not helping them through the process. And many times, because of the guilt and the shame that they feel, that is why they do it. Not because they actually want to, but because they're scared of what people might say. And that is very sad. And that is something that as a church, as Christians, we need to fix. We need to be able to provide women with help when they need it, so that they don't feel that this is their only way out, that they know that there is other options, that there are other options available. I was teaching this class last night to the youth, and I told them, yeah, if you have sex out of wedlock, it is a sin. It's called fornication. This is true. But a pregnancy doesn't make it worse, right? It's not just more elevated now because there is evidence of the sin, right? The sin happened way before that, and God saw it. Maybe nobody else did, but God did, and He's the one you offended. The baby is not responsible for that sin, right? And then so how many sins do we not commit on a daily basis that don't have an outward appearance, that doesn't have this, an evidence of it? There's much worse sins. There's sins in our hearts, lack of forgiveness and resentment and anger, that are so much more damaging than bringing a baby into the world. That is a blessing. That child did not catch God by surprise. He knew that they were coming, and He has plans for that child. When my mom got pregnant with me, she wasn't married, and she was presented with the option to have an abortion. Imagine that. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't exist. But thank God that that wasn't the case, right? God had a plan for my life, and here I am, and now you guys got to deal with me. But I think you're happy. At least I hope. So now we're going to see the what the partial birth abortion looks like.
The next technique we're going to demonstrate is the partial birth abortion. Partial birth abortion is a term that we hear a lot about in the news, but I really can't believe that people really understand what it means. Otherwise, we would not allow this procedure to be performed anywhere, not only in this country, but in the world. But a partial birth abortion is performed when the baby is too far developed in order to either be sucked out with a suction curette or to be able to be dismembered and brought out piece by piece with this forceps. A partial birth abortion, or a D and X, is very similar to what it says. We're going to deliver the majority of the baby, and then before the baby's head is delivered, then we're going to actually kill the baby. Now, before the procedure would start, the cervix would have already received those things we talked about called laminaria. Those are the sticks that go into the cervix that would then swell overnight and would open up the cervix because we have a lot more baby to deliver. And this can be performed anywhere up to term because remember, Doe versus Bolton defined mother's health as physical, emotional, psychological, familial, and age. So as long as the physician under those definitions says mother's health is in jeopardy, this procedure can be performed. Now, using an ultrasound to guide, the cervix will be dilated, the speculum would already be in place to open things up, and then using the ultrasound as a guide, this instrument would be placed in the inside through the cervix and would then grab one of the baby's feet. Once that foot is grabbed with that tenaculum, that foot is then brought to the outside. Once that first foot is brought to the outside, then the second foot would be brought to the outside. And then with traction with a baby that is still alive, the baby would then have both legs delivered, would then have its belly delivered. Once the baby is brought further down, first one arm would be delivered. That would be rotated this way. And then the baby is rotated around the other way, and the second arm is delivered. Now, the entire baby from the neck down is now alive and in the abortionist's hands that's performing this procedure. The entire baby, including the head, are already out of the womb, beyond the cervix, and the only thing that's left on the inside of the mother is the baby's head, but that's only just inside the vagina. And baby is moving, baby is alive, baby is intact up to this point. But if the baby then delivers, it's then considered a live birth, and the baby would have to go to the nursery. But before that's allowed to happen, this is when the abortion would actually kill the baby. And the way they do that is, if you remember from biology class, there's that connection between the brain and the spinal cord, and that opening at the base of the skull is called the foramen magnum. And that small hole with the baby moving and alive in one hand, a pair of scissors, these are called Metzenbaum scissors. These scissors are then placed into the base of the skull, and these scissors are then placed in through that foramen magnum up into the baby's brain and skull cavity. The scissors are then opened up, and then if that hasn't killed the baby, then one of the suction curettes is then placed through that same hole up into the baby's skull and brain. The suction is applied, and just how you saw how powerful that suction machine is, if it can crush the steel can, then it can definitely kill the baby there on the inside. Once the baby has then been killed and is no longer alive, then the remainder, which is just the baby's head, is then delivered, and the procedure is then completed for the delivery of the baby. Once the baby is delivered, though, then the only thing that's left is to deliver the placenta by just, again, scraping the placenta and bringing that down. So when you hear the term partial birth abortion, that's what's going on. A baby is being delivered the feet, the abdomen, the chest, the arms and the legs. The baby is then killed, and then once the baby is killed, then the remainder of the baby is allowed to be delivered. So that's partial birth abortion.
This is allowed because they defined a woman's health. They gave it this really broad definition, right? So a woman's health is basically anything, whatever decision, whatever she feels is considered her health is in jeopardy, and now we can perform this. I don't think that ever has to happen. Actually, I'm sure that never has to happen in order to save a woman's life. It just doesn't. If you're able to deliver the baby all the way except the head, then you can just deliver the baby altogether. Right? It makes no difference on the life of the woman whatsoever. This is really what they were saying. It's infanticide. It really is. I mean, this is murder. I mean, it's murder all the time, regardless of the stage of development. But this is really horrific. I don't know what doctors put themselves, allow themselves to do something like this. The reason that they have to, though, leave the head inside is because if the baby then comes out and is able to breathe on his own, now it's considered a person. Yeah, because they took their first breath. Now it's a person. Now we can't kill it. That's all that changed. Nothing else. It's absurd, and it's really horrible what these things do. But this is what we're facing today. Perhaps you might hear, well, it doesn't happen that often. It's really not a lot. Most abortions happen within the first trimester. That's irrelevant. One of these procedures is too many. That's it. It should never happen. Anywhere in the world, it should never happen. We are literally killing the most innocent amongst us, the ones that can't defend themselves. This is our modern day Holocaust. This is what's happening in our Planned Parenthood clinics that are all throughout our country. This is what our tax dollars are funding. And what can we do about it? There are things that we can do. So I want to show this call to action. And the first thing that we can do is definitely, you call your senators. We have a voice. We can call the senators. We can call the House of the representatives in our state and let them know that we are not in favor of this bill. Right? They're supposed to be passing bills that the people agree with. They're not supposed to go against. They're supposed to be representing us. So if enough of us speak up, perhaps they'll hear. Another thing that you can do is support pro-life ministry. So what we said earlier, some women feel that they don't have the support that they need to carry out this pregnancy and to have their baby. But there is help. Gateway Pregnancy Center, where I volunteer, is just one of many non-for-profits that work in favor of the women, to help them, to give them support, whether it be financial support or mental support. I believe there is another one here in New Jersey, right, where they even take them in and help them for a whole year. There is plenty of help. And this is one of the things that we really need to let people know about, because pro-choicers are very quick to say, well, you're just pro-birth. You're not really pro-life. Once the baby is born, you guys don't do anything for these babies. It's not the case. There's actually a lot of things that pro-lifers and Christians do to help women. And there is just not enough information to them available. They don't know that these resources are out there. So we need to let them know. We need to make people aware of these things. Speak to others. There's many people still thinking or believing the lie that it's not a person, that it's just a clump of cells, that the woman has the right to her bodily autonomy. And I hope that you've learned something today and that you feel confident to go out and have these conversations. I'll say that you should have these conversations in a delicate way. We don't want to sound like we're just pushing an agenda or like we're just in favor of a political party. This is not a political issue. This is a moral issue. And we need to be on the side of God. We need to represent God, but we need to also do it with love and care and understanding. So we don't want to start up arguments where we're like yelling at other people because they're wrong. We want to help them get to the realization that what they have believed is a lie. And there's logical ways to do that. And then last but not least, and probably most important of all, is prayer. We got to pray a lot. We got to pray on behalf of our country. We got to pray for our leaders that are creating these laws. We got to pray and believe that if God was able to end the Holocaust, that he can end this as well. That he's powerful enough to do it, and we just need to believe that, and we need to pray to God that he will end it. And that's really all that I have for tonight. I'll open it up to see if anybody has questions or comments. It's recorded, right? Yeah, so when a woman is raped, it's a horrible thing. We care for that person having gone through something so traumatic. But the baby is not responsible for that. The baby is not guilty of that sin. So the baby should not have to face the death penalty because of the sin of the father. They're just not the ones to pay for that. Abortions because of rape are like less than 1%. It's very few that happen because of rape. And we do actually have a lot of testimonies of women who have been raped and chosen to deliver their baby. And there is no psychological trauma. They actually love their babies. So there is this idea that, they're going to live horrible lives looking at this baby every day, remembering what they went through. And the data doesn't support that idea. It really isn't the case. But women do face a lot of psychological trauma when they go through an abortion. So now, imagine you've been raped and then you go through an abortion procedure. Now that's double the trauma. And now, I've personally met women that, they have nightmares, recurring nightmares after the procedure. They regret it. They wish they could go back. They go into deep depression because of it. That's why I said it is not really for the health or the benefit of the woman. It benefits them in no way. In no way.